So the cool thing about playing guitar is that no matter how long you end up playing, whether you've been playing for a week or for 20 years, you're always going to be learning. You will never learn everything there is to know about this instrument. And throughout our time as guitar players, we tend to go through periods of growth and then plateaus or falling into ruts, and then periods of growth again. But at the end of the day, it always just comes down to how much time you're putting into the instrument. How often are you picking up your guitar and playing it? Now, when I was first starting out, there's a few things that I spent my time really focusing on and really worried about that, looking back now, I realize was actually somewhat of a waste of time. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you 5 things that I think guitar players are wasting their time working on. Before we get into the video though, I want to take a second to plug my new video course, the Fretboard Fundamentals Chords and Rhythm course. If you're watching this video the week it releases, we're currently taking pre-orders for the course. If you're interested, it'll never be this discounted ever again. You can find out more information about it in the link down below. And if you're watching this video later, it's still linked down below and you can still find a discount code waiting for you there if you're so inclined to check it out. And also, if you're a beginner player, I've got a beginner-friendly playlist of videos that I've made on this channel over the last 4 years. You can check that out here or down in the description box below. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at our first example. Reading. This is one of the biggest things that I struggled with when I was in music school about 10 or 11 years ago. I was a terrible reader. And I should point out, when I say reading, I don't mean, reading books. I'm talking about reading standard notation on guitar. I think it's a complete waste of time. With a few minor exceptions, I don't think it's worth spending time learning how to read standard notation. I've made my living as a guitar player for the last 11 years, and I've never had to read a single line of standard notation once on any gig that I've found myself on. Now, part of that is because the type of gigs that I've gone after and the type of guitar player I am doesn't require that. Combine that with the fact that reading on guitar is exceptionally difficult, especially for a beginner. This was the big struggle that I had when I was in music school. I worked and worked and worked on it. I had lessons from my teachers on it, and I never really could wrap my head around trying to read or sight read standard notation on guitar. So unless you know for a fact that as a guitar player, you want to get into gigs like playing in a pit band for a Broadway play at a high-level corporate event, or do some kind of orchestration, playing with an orchestra, I don't think being able to read standard notation is something that you should spend a lot of time worrying about. Next up on the list is speed or learning to play fast. Now, before you jump in my comments section and start berating me for how much of an idiot I am for advocating not learning how to play fast, hear me out. That's actually not what I'm saying. For beginner guitar players, it's a little bit overwhelming to try and figure out what to learn. It's a bit like drinking from a fire hose. That it can be really difficult to put together a coherent strategy for learning guitar. I might recommend a specific video course for that, actually, if you were so inclined. But as a beginner, I think there's more important things to focus on rather than trying to just play as fast as you can. Number one is learning to play clean. And I don't mean a clean electric guitar tone. I mean being able to play both chords and single note lines or solos super clean. Being able to voice all your different chords easily and quickly, transferring between them and then moving on to more expensive or more complex chord voicings as you go, I think is way more important than learning super fast licks right out of the gate. If you practice other concepts like vibrato, hammer-ons, pull-offs, alternate picking, playing with a metronome, being able to pick cleanly and consistently, all of these other things will end up building speed in the long run. And it's going to make you a much faster player and a much better sounding player if you focus on these concepts early on rather than just trying to play as fast as you can. So instead, slow it down, work with a metronome, record what you're practicing and listen back to it. That's going to give you way more feedback and tell you exactly what you need to focus on rather than just trying to play something as fast as you can. So that was the first guitar solo I ever learned about 20 years ago. It's David Gilmour's intro solo on Wish You Were Here. And this brings me to my next point, which is learn solos, not scales. Now, scales are important. We all need to know things like our minor and major pentatonic scales, for example. And there is going to be a time where you need to spend actually focusing on learning a specific scale shape, like the major scale, for example. You need to understand what's in that scale and why it functions the way it does, and know where to put your fingers to create the intervals for that scale. But many players, even advanced players, can spend, I think, too much time focusing on learning specific scales, trying to master where their fingers should go on the fretboard to get specific intervals and specific sounds. And I don't think that that's the most musical way to practice, because you don't play a solo like this. There's nothing musical about that. But learning solos will quickly get you out of just learning the pentatonic box, for example, and teach you things that you can do utilizing these scales. And it's also useful for helping you understand that a solo, a truly great solo, is not all just about the scale. It's not just about what scale you play over what chord. It's more about melody lines and chord tones and outlining chords. And those are things that, at least for me, I learn best when I'm transcribing or learning a solo. Like the Wish You Were Here solo. That's a great lesson in G major pentatonic. This entire solo lives in this G major pentatonic box. When I learned the solo for Wish You Were Here, I didn't know that it was G major pentatonic, or that you could play an E minor pentatonic scale over the G major, because E minor is the relative minor of G major. I didn't learn that stuff until years later. Instead, I learned how to be musical and play musically with a simple pentatonic scale shape. The next thing to be wary of is spending too much time worrying about gear. We all love gear. Gear is great. Things like guitars and pedals and amplifiers are tools that we use to express ourselves. I'm a huge fan of fuzz pedals, for example. I start collecting these things. I don't need another fuzz, but I buy them because they all do different things and they all inspire me to play slightly differently. They inspire different ideas. And at its best, that's what gear and gear acquisition can do for you. These are tools that you can utilize to further your self-expression. But there's a downside to it. There's a pitfall, which is the fact that many of us at some point in our playing history spend more time looking online, watching YouTube videos or on Reverb, worrying about what next piece of gear to buy than we do actually playing the guitar and the gear we already have. And I don't think that's a great thing if your goal with guitar is to get better. The other thing to be careful of here is the idea of, I can't do X until I buy Y. Or I want to write and record my first EP, but I can't do that until I go out and spend $5,000 on a basic home studio setup. When in reality, you can make incredible art with a $100 SM57 and a basic recording interface. It's more about understanding how to use these tools than acquiring more tools. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that you shouldn't go out and buy that guitar or that next amp or that new pedal if that's what you truly want, if that's what's going to make you happy and give you enjoyment out of playing guitar. Instead, what I'm saying is be careful to not spend more time worrying about the gear you're playing than your actual playing. The last point I want to make is comparison. Don't waste your time comparing yourself and comparing your sound or your abilities to other guitar players or other instrumentalists or just other people in general. Everyone is on their own journey. Everyone has their own experiences. Everyone has their own inspirations, what they want to do, what they've heard before, what got them into guitar, how long they've been playing, did they have a teacher or not, did they go to school for it. Everyone's path to this instrument and through this instrument are completely different. So in my mind, it's not worth wasting your time comparing yourself to other guitar players. And I'm very much preaching to myself here because this is a lesson that I can't seem to learn, even though I put it in video form. Comparing yourself to other players doesn't do anything beneficial for you. It's not going to make you a better guitar player overnight. It might motivate you to practice more, but in my mind, I don't think that's the right motivation to practice. I don't think it's a good idea to try and get better at guitar so that you can be better than someone else at guitar. And in the end, it's just damaging for your mental health, and it's taking the enjoyment and the love of the instrument away from you. And again, I speak from experience here. Instead, try to be proactive about looking at other people's playing and finding something inspiring in it. What can you learn from watching some of your favorite players? Or what can you learn from people that you know that are better players than you or more experienced players than you or just different players than you? I tend to believe that at a certain point, people stop getting better than one another and they start to just get different. Their sounds get different, their inspirations, their style, how they approach the instrument, what they play, what they write, what they want to hear It's not necessarily better than someone else, it's just different. Comparison is the thief of joy, especially when it comes to learning something as difficult as guitar. So don't waste your time doing it. So those are 5 things I think you shouldn't waste your time doing when it comes to learning guitar. I'd love to know what you think. What are your 5 things? Let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget, you can pre-order my new video course, Fretboard Fundamentals, Chords and Rhythm, via the link down below. The pre-order price is as discounted as the course will ever be. So if you're interested in picking it up, I'd recommend checking that link out down below. Also, if you're a complete beginner, don't forget to check out my beginner-friendly playlist here or in the description box below. It's a series of videos that I've made on this channel over the last 4 years that are designed to help beginners get better at guitar. My name is Rhett Shull. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, there is no plan B.